Good evening. We read in the Bible, when you pray, believe that ye have already received. Have you ever tried to do that? Have you ever tried to believe that you've already received when you didn't have it? It's an impossibility. It's a form of self-hypnotism to sit around with a pain and say, I am well already. Or while you're trying to meet your rent, to say, I have an abundance. It is an insult to our own intelligence. And yet, there is nothing more important than the correct understanding of that statement. When you pray, believe that you have already received. And the answer to how that can be done lies in just some of the subjects that we have been taking up in this work. If you will remember, on at least during two of these meetings, we have taken up the subject of never letting our prayer concern the future tense. That every prayer must be a realization of the present tense, now and here. Well, of course, from a human standpoint, to be ill and say I am well does insult your intelligence, and it cannot result in much of a healing consciousness. Or to be severely in lack and say I have abundance must also be a difficult pill to swallow. It would be for me. And yet, the prayer, the communion, the treatment must always be in the present tense, and so we must find a way of getting around that situation so that we can conform to the commandment, to the command, to believe that ye have already received. Now, since that is a major point in our work, let us understand it. You will notice in every one of the Infinite Way writings that it tells us that every prayer or treatment must begin with the word God. Now it begins to change the picture, since no matter what the appearance is, we are at the moment not looking at it. We're not looking at the appearance. We're not judging by what we see, but rather we're substituting the word God. Let me illustrate. Let us say, for argument's sake, that we are presented with a problem of lack or limitation of any nature. It doesn't make no difference what the nature is. And, all right, we'll take the problem of lack of money for one thing, and then we'll take the problem of a lack of health for another thing. All right, the appearance or claim or problem is a lack of health or a lack of finances. Now, our treatment begins with the word God. So we are not going to declare any truth or do any praying about lack of health or lack of finances. Our prayer is going to concern the word God. Immediately, We have turned from the claim and we've substituted the word God. Now let us see what happens. God. God is infinite. Yes? Agree on that? God is infinite. God is omnipresent. Agree on that? God is omnipresent. God is supply. Agree on that? Well then, God is infinite supply, and God is omnipresent supply. Now that doesn't insult your intelligence, does it? Because we are not concerned now with your health or your supply. We are now concerned with God's health and God's supply, and it is infinite and it is omnipresent. Supposing we had a lack of wisdom, guidance, and we were seeking some wisdom and we were seeking some guidance, it would be a terrible thing to say, I have all the wisdom in the world and I have all the guidance in the world, because you and I both know it isn't true. And yet our prayer, treatment, communion must concern itself with the present tense. Now the only way to get around that is to start with the word God and realize, but God is mind. If God is mind, God is the only intelligence. But since God is infinite and God is omnipresent, then intelligence, wisdom, guidance, direction is infinite and omnipresent. Is that clear? You can only do this if you stay in God. You can't if you come down to he is wise, or he has abundance, or she is healthy. You can't do that. You can't do that. You're lying every minute of your treatment. You're not knowing the truth. You're just not knowing the truth when you say that a person is well who is sick. And it's knowing the truth that makes you free, not lying about your friends and patients and students. So then, the way to know the truth about them is to know the truth about God. Now, how does this help yourself or your friend or your patient? God constitutes your being. And so anything that is true about God is automatically and instantaneously true about you in your real being. Not about you in this appearance world, but declaring truth about you in the appearance world won't do anything for you. It is knowing the truth about God that does it for you, because any truth that you know about God is the truth about your real being. And knowing that truth sets you free from the appearance or claim or suggestion of a selfhood apart from God or a condition apart from God. Now, when you pray, believe that you have already received. You see how you can do that? The moment you realize in your prayer, treatment, or communion, God is infinite good. And then it says, Son, all that I have is thine. So now, Son, all that I have is thine is an omnipresent truth in this instant. So you're declaring about the truth about God and realizing that every truth about God is truth about individual being, because I and the Father are one. So any truth about God must be true about the Son of God. Now, it would be, yes, if we looked out at our sunbeams, we might not know a truth about them, but if we turn to the sun, we will say, oh, warmth, heat, light. Heat and light are the constituent elements of the sun. Now let's come down and look at a sunbeam, and you'll find that heat and light constitute a sunbeam. But supposing you were to say that a sunbeam is heat and light, would that be true? No, because the heat and the light belong to the sun. And they're only of the sunbeam because of the sunbeam's oneness with God. So it is with us. If I look out at you and say, you have health and you have wealth, I lie. But if I say that God is health and God is wealth, and then come down to the individualization of God, I find that all that God has, individual you has. Do you see that? We are claiming that whatever is true of the sun in the sky is true of the sunbeams. We are declaring that everything that is true of God is true of individual being, because we as individual beings are really the sunbeam, the emanation, the offspring, the Son of God. But don't declare it out here. It would be like declaring that an electric light bulb is light, or has light. And it hasn't. Electricity has light. And it is only by going back to electricity that then you can come down to the individual bulb and say, yes, the light of the electricity is the light of the bulb. But the bulb of itself isn't light and hasn't any light. Only in its oneness with electricity has it light. Do you see that? So it is with us. I of my own self can do nothing, the Master says. If I speak of myself, I speak a lie. My doctrine is not mine. The Father doeth the works. But then later he says, whatever the Father does, that's what I do. The Father worketh, and I work hitherto. All that the Father hath is mine. Do you see that? So you can claim, and you can believe, that you have already received harmony, peace, joy, power, dominion, infinite good, infinite supply. Why? Because those are the elements of God, and the elements of God are the qualities, activities, being of individual being. Now, you can understand this the moment you catch a glimpse of the nature of God. You cannot understand this, you can't believe it, you can't demonstrate it, as long as you believe that there is a Jewish God, a Protestant God, a Hebrew God, an Hindu God, or a Catholic God. You're lost. As long as you believe that any church or any religion has a God, you're lost. You cannot come into the harmony of your being. It is only when you can begin to perceive that God is one, and that God that is one is a universal being, presence, cause, life, and that in that God there is no respect of persons. There is neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free. Now, the moment you can understand that God, then you can understand why all that is true of this universal God is true of the individual Son of God, without any relationship as to whether he has a religion or hasn't, whether he has a church or hasn't, because God was the same before there ever was a church. God was God before there ever was a church, and God was love before anybody ever voiced it. God was the divine mind before anybody ever voiced it, and it has only been voiced because it was discovered that it was true. Now, it is true that God is one God, universal God, no respecter of persons, no respecter of churches, no respecter, not even a respecter of good or evil. His rain falls on the just and on the unjust. You cannot catch the faintest glimpse of God if you believe that the sinner has any less of God than the saint. The sinner only has a lesser awareness of God. But there's just as much of God in the sinner awaiting recognition as there is in the saint. On the other hand, to believe that just because a person is good that they have God is not to understand God. because there are loads and loads and loads of wonderful, wonderful human beings who have never had a trace of God, and they've never done a bad thing in their life and never thought a bad thought, but they've had no God. Why? Because God has nothing to do with goodness or badness. God is a state of infinite being available to all those who turn. Always, if you want to set the stage for the proper understanding of God, you must study the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. And there you must ask yourself, can you find one single place in there where the Master refused to heal somebody because they had sinned, or where he condemned them because they had sinned, or where he told them that they were outside of God's grace because they had sinned? Oh, no. His whole answer was, neither do I condemn thee, but just don't go and sin anymore. Don't go back to the same state of consciousness that brought on this condition. But so far as the past is concerned, it is wiped out. Why? Well, that's what we've been taking up here tonight. There is no future tense, but there is no past tense. There is no past tense in your life. This is the only moment you will ever live. You can never live this morning, and you can't live tomorrow morning. This is the only minute you can live, and that living takes place in this second. This is the second of life. This is the second in which you are witnessing the whole experience of life. You can't witness it an hour ago. You can't witness it an hour from now. Only in this second. And it is now that we are the sons of God. So that all of our sins of omission or commission, if they are scarlet, ye are this minute white as snow. Of course, you can make yourself scarlet again a minute from now, but the next minute after, you can get white. Well, how long does that go on, do you say? Forever? Forever. The Master says, if they sin against you 70 times 7 and they ask forgiveness, just give it. 70 times 7, 490 times. You know, nobody ever got up to 490 times yet. You can sin, but you won't get past 300 times. You'll be healed long by the time you've done it 300 times over. But we still have another 170, isn't it? 190 to go. No. It makes no difference how many times you sin. It is in this minute that you are white as snow. And if by any chance you become red as or scarlet with sin tomorrow, start again in this minute to remember that you're white as snow. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself 70 times 7, and long before you have arrived at 70 times 7, you'll find that that whiteness won't come out anymore. That'll really be a permanent dye. But so it is with those who offend us. Remember that if they seek forgiveness, be just as sure to remember that now are we the sons of God. That though their sins were scarlet, right now they're white as snow. And so we don't condemn them for their past sins, but we do say, go and sin no more. Don't repeat it again. However, if they do and want to be forgiven, remember they have 490 chances. Now then, the point of it is that now is the minute of our salvation. If we were to pass on in this second, our experience in the next world or in the next phase of world would be dependent on our experience in this minute. In other words, in this moment of God awareness in which we find ourselves in this room in this minute, that is the experience in which we would wake up. Because now is the time, and we progress from where we are. All right. In order to believe that you already have when you pray, really make your prayer the realization that God already has and that God already is. And then whatever you find to be true about God, recognize to be the truth of your individual being, because that is the truth. Whatever is true about God is true about you, because all the Father hath is yours. And remember this: Son, thou art ever with me. You are never separated from God. Not even in those moments of your deepest sins are you separated from God. I and the Father are one is a present tense relationship. I and the Father are one eternally. Always, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I and the Father are one. Yea, though I make my bed in hell, I and the Father are one. Do you see that? Now, watch yourself, because there are moments when you're sick, and there are moments when you've been in sin, or moments when you've been in lack, and you've said, oh, I'm separated from God, and because you declared that, you made it so unto you. You made that law for yourself. God didn't, because you couldn't get separated from God. There was a man hanging on a cross, and he got there because of his crimes. And he said to the master, take me with you. And the master gave no argument. I'll take you with me in paradise tonight. No argument, no back talk, no telling him how much punishment he had to have or how much karma he had to work out. Nothing. Tonight I will take you with me into paradise. Why? The thief on the cross made his own law, and it was a law of forgiveness. Watch the master, and you will see that it's a law of forgiveness all the way through. The whole 4 testaments are nothing but a law of forgiveness. He's just walking up and down the earth forgiving everybody right and left. And if they sin over again, he tells them not to, but if they do, and he says, forgive them again. So forgiveness is a law. But you make the law for yourself, either by saying, I am separate from God, or by realizing that no matter what I do, I can't be separated from God. Well, you have seen men and women sinning, and you've noted how their parents cling to them even in their sins. Well, just go a step further and realize what God must be as father and mother, and you'll know then that we couldn't ever sin enough to separate ourselves from God. What we can do, and this is what we do, we set up a sense of separation from God. In other words, we make a law within our own being and say, oh, I am separated from God. God has forsaken me. Or, well, I guess I have forsaken God. In either case, we have made that law for ourselves, and we pay the penalty of doing it, because the truth is just the opposite. Whither shall I flee from thy spirit? If I make my bed in hell, thou art there. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art there. Now, as you declare for omnipresence now, in your sickness, in your sins, in your poverty, if you walk up and down the street without a penny, you can still realize the omnipresence of God. Don't know the omnipresence of money, because that's foolish. And at the time, it isn't even true. But it is true that the omnipresence of God is with you. In poverty, in sickness, in sin, in prison, God is with you. Remember the illustration I have used here of Jesus on the cross. And just imagine if there were a crowd standing there watching and saying, how he has failed in his demonstration. I guess God has forsaken him. Now, wouldn't that be the natural reaction? Wouldn't that be the natural reaction for us to say, what a terrible demonstration? Well, I guess there's no God in that picture. I can't see God in that picture, a man hanging from a cross. And yet, wasn't that his demonstration? Wasn't that his proof of immortality? Was there any other way for him to show forth the indestructibility of life? Why, certainly. But it took people of spiritual discernment to know that. And so it is. Very often, you may see a person in some distress, and you say, well, they're not showing forth very much of their teaching. Well, they're not showing very much of their religion. Well, that's not a very good demonstration of their God. Well, don't judge by appearances. That very circumstance through which they are going may be the finest proof in the world of God's presence, and it may be that experience that will prove to them. I had an experience like that many years ago when I was in the business world. I was to drive from Detroit, Michigan to New York, and I was to begin the trip on New Year's Day. And it was clear, no sign of snow in the air, clear as could be. And I thought, well, rather than go down through Ohio, I'm going to drive across Canada, go into Windsor and on to Toronto and over to Buffalo and on down. And a trip which I would not have made in snow. But here it was clear, and that's the way I was going to go. But a strange thing happened. I was going to start out early on this New Year's morning, or day after New Year's, and something wouldn't let me go. Something told me to go to a reading room. And I did. I went to a Christian Science reading room early in the morning, as soon as it was open. Didn't know why. I sat there, meditated. Then I went over to a desk where they had the books laid out, and I was going to do the daily lesson. I couldn't. I couldn't even get into that first section. It just wouldn't let me. Sat back again in a chair, and then I noticed on a table was a book, one of the other writings of Mrs. Eddy. First Church of Christ Scientists and Miscellany. And I opened it, and my eyes struck this passage. Remember, well, I can't quote it exactly now, but remember, in any circumstance that you may deem afflictive, it may be an angel entertained unawares. I can tell you where it is. It's on page 149, on the bottom of the page, of First Church of Christ Scientists and Miscellany. But I can't remember the exact wording. Remember that if you're brought into any condition, be it so afflictive that it may be, and so forth. Well, I read that, and I felt better. Then I went back to doing the daily lesson again, and I couldn't. Again, I sat in a chair. Then I went over to the bookcases, and I picked out a volume of Christian Science Sentinels from way back in the 1890s. Don't ask me why now. But when I opened it, I opened to an editorial by Mrs. Eddy. Remember, thou canst be brought into no condition, be it ever so afflictive, where the divine presence has not been before thee, and so forth and so on. That's it. Where the divine presence, where his presence has not been before thee. Well, that was the second time I read the same passage in two different books, and I said, evidently that's my lesson. And so I started out for New York, and I hadn't reached far into Canada when the snow fell. And before you know it, I was stuck in the snow. Well, I began to remember that I couldn't be brought into any condition where his presence hadn't been before me. And right at the side of the road, I found a nice home to stop in that night with a private family. And it was noon the next day before the snow was cleared. I started out, and just as I got outside of Buffalo, my car turned and hit into a snowbank, and I was frozen in there hard. Well, I settled back. What am I going to do? Here I am. And again, remember, thou canst be brought into no condition, be it ever so afflicted, where his presence has not been before thee. And just then, an automobile honked, and a truck driver stopped and said, stuck in there? Sure. Oh, I'll get you out. Out he came with his chains and got me out. And a little while later, I was on the way. But I went past Buffalo, and I thought, I'm going to do as much time as I can tonight, as much speed, as much space as I can, and get out of this, when, lo and behold, again I smacked into a snowbank and was stuck in again until a very big Buick came along with chains, and he took me out. I said, well, God, I think you've done a good job tonight. I'm going to stop at the next hotel until morning and not test this out anymore. But there were three experiences. Well, the first wasn't so bad because I was right there. Even humanly, there was a place to go. But in these other two places, there was no place to go. I was stuck out on the road in a snowbank in a heavy storm, and I wasn't there long enough even to get chilled in the car before I was pulled out of it twice. And so it came back to me, be it so ever so afflictive, his presence has gone before. Now then, you might say, why didn't God prevent you from going into those snowbanks? Well, I don't know the answer, except that I'm sure that I would not be telling the story tonight if he had kept me out of the snowbank. And it's very important to tell this story because there were afflictive circumstances, serious ones out on the cold nights like that, and his presence had gone before me, and it proved it. And I've told this story of the time when I was a Christian Science reader and had a bad cold and went on the platform with handkerchiefs up to my nose, and the board of directors of the church were ready to meet and throw me out. The only thing is that before the hour was up, I had a complete healing. And then they said, that was marvelous. You actually demonstrated that Christian Science heals. They saw it. The whole church saw it. And they did. Well, I guess God could have prevented my having a cold beforehand, but what a beautiful way to show a whole church that it works. I have never had a fear of problems. I've had some discomfort in them, but I've had no fear of them for this very reason, that I am convinced that every problem that comes to us is not so much a problem as an opportunity, for the simple reason that if we were to go along in our human way with enough supply every day and with enough health every day, what would ever wean us away from our dependence on physical health and physical wealth? How would we ever arrive at a state of consciousness where we could really know that we do not live by bread alone, but by every word of truth? Every word that comes out of the mouth of God, every word of truth we live by. How would we ever do it? I've told you over and over and over again that Eddie Rickenbacker is a very, very religious man in his way. Not in a church way, but in his inner life. And how could he have shown to the world the benefits of his religion except by the two horrible experiences he had? Both of them nearly took his life. Now, God didn't prevent his having the experiences, but God was with him in those experiences. God did not prevent Moses and the Hebrews. God did not prevent Jesus being tempted 3 times in the wilderness. And the New Testament says also, it seems that every time Satan left Jesus, the statement reads, and Satan left him for a season. He never did quite leave him forever until the ascension. So that never believe that trials, problems, lacks, disease, or even sin, that represents a lack of God or God's desertion of us. On the contrary, very often it is the very thing that leads us out of our dependence on material things and persons. Who knows better to depend on God than an individual who has lost his friends, or who hasn't any relatives? Who knows more the omnipresence of God than the person who has gone through difficult trials, temptations, adventures? No. Now, what I am being led to say tonight is that there is too much, especially in the metaphysical world, there is too much fear of either sin or disease or death or lack, rather than an understanding of, if this is the lesson necessary to carry me into spiritual awareness, then I can take it. If all of the great prophets, look what the Hebrew prophets went through. Think of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Isaiah, Elijah, Elisha. Think of what those people went through, Moses. And don't you know that they had God with them? Why, they're the ones who coined the word Emmanuel, God with us. They knew God with us. No matter what the trial, no matter what the temptation, no matter what the problem, they knew Emmanuel, God with us. And so it is that as we come to the Master, we find that he knows that the Father within me doeth the works, and the Father is ever with me, for I and the Father are one. Now, rather than indulge thoughts like, well, I've gone back on God, or maybe God has lost track of me, turn rather in the realization that even though God is invisible, God is on the scene. Bring it to the present tense. God may be invisible, but God is on the scene. Then you'll bring the effect of God into the situation. I'll have it here. Supposing we are faced with a problem here tonight. What will meet it for us? And just so that you don't give me any wrong answers, I'll tell you that it isn't any truth you know that will meet it for you. There isn't any truth you know now or any truth you've ever studied that will meet the problem for you or for whoever it is that has the problem and brings it to you. Never believe for a minute that you can declare a truth or think a truth that's going to meet your problem. One thing alone is going to meet it: the activity of the Christ. That alone is going to meet it. The activity of the Spirit, the activity of God in you. There is a spirit in man. In the Hebrew language, it's called Emmanuel. In the Greek, it is called the Christ. In Aramaic, it is called the Messiah. In English, it's called the Spirit of God. Chinese, it's called Tao. Hindu, they've got a lot of names for it. Brahm. The word doesn't make any difference because it's just the same word in many languages. But the word is the activity or presence of God. That is what meets the need. Not some truth that you think, not some words that you declare, so that when you come to an actual place of wanting to meet a need, it is not the words or thoughts that meet it, but the activity of God in your consciousness. Now, for that purpose, you may use words and statements of truth. For instance, in our treatment prayer, as we have tonight, we started with the word God. Then we went through that process until we realized that all that God is, I am, all that the Father hath is mine. But remember, I didn't say that that was going to heal you of anything. I merely said that is the truth that we must start to know if we're going to know the truth consciously. But the healing agency is only going to come after you have stopped those thoughts and gotten quiet and into your receptive mood. Now, if we hold our hand up to a piece of electric wiring, nothing happens, we know it is because there is no electricity there. But if we snap the button and put our finger there and get a shock, now the electricity is there. So with us. When you have your treatment, prayer, communion, whatever you call it, whatever sentences you're going to use, whatever statements of truth you're going to remember, go through them, but then remember that you've done nothing yet to bring about the healing. You've only gotten ready to bring about the healing. Now you're sitting back, and you've got your ear open, you're listening. Whether there are any thoughts in your mind or not is unimportant, because they're not going to harm anything, they're not going to help anything. And please remember that they're neither going to harm nor help. Don't be afraid of any bad thoughts up there, because they're apt to come out of the world. And don't think that any good thoughts that you have are going to help anybody, because they're not. But as you wait, very soon some statement of truth will flash into your mind, or if not, you'll feel a deep sigh in there. That's the equivalent of feeling the electric shock. You know there's electricity there? The minute you feel this deep sigh in here, that's the evidence of the presence of God. Now the healing takes place. Only when you get that feeling within you in some way of a presence. It's an assurance. To each one it comes in a different way. It comes sometimes with a deep breath like that. Sometimes it comes in an actual statement of some kind from the Bible or from a metaphysical writing. And other times it just comes in a release. You get that feeling of a weight dropping off your shoulder. That's that. That's it. Any of those things is the signal that God is on the field, that you've had a God contact, that God is actually there. Now that's what does the work. It is that God contact that does the work. It is nothing that has taken place in your mind, nothing that has taken place in the realm of thought, nothing that you read. Those were only preparations to get to a state of consciousness where this click takes place, this deep breath, this sigh, or this unfoldment from within. Now remember that. The end and object of treatment, prayer, communion is to have an actual feeling or awareness of God's presence. When you have that, whether it's for some problem of your own or a patient or student, be assured that the help has come, because that is announcing the presence of God. That is Emmanuel. Then you can say, Emmanuel, God is with us. Or then you can say, God is on the field. Or then you can say, the Father within me now is doing the works. Just the statement, God within me doeth the works, will do nothing for you. It has to be an actual presence of God within you. Then it does the works. And so, All of this work leads up to this. If you begin with your present tense now, if you begin to know that in God, no matter what it is you're seeking, no matter what it is you're trying to accomplish, no matter what it is that's in your mind or for whom it is, remember that so far as God is concerned, it's an is. It's already accomplished. It's already in God's being, and because it's in God's being, it's omnipresent in your being, my being, his being, her being. Then, having reached that state of assurance, then get quiet. And if you don't get your satisfaction, your feeling of peace, get up and go away, and an hour or two later do it over again. And if you don't get your full release then, come back an hour or two later and do it over again, until you do get that inner peace. Don't sit and try to bullet through. Don't try to force it through. You can't take heaven by storm. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. So don't try mentally to hammer away thinking you're going to reach God. Don't try physically to sit there all tense. You won't do it that way. If you don't get the response in a few minutes and you begin to tense up, stop and go away, because you're not going to do it through might. You're not going to do it through power. You're only going to do it through an absence of might and an absence of power, when there's no sense of power at all, just the feeling, it is done. It is done. Sure, like 2 times 2 or 4 is done. When was it done? Just now? Way back in the beginning. Now we became aware of it. Always remember that in God's kingdom, nothing ever happens now even, or tomorrow. Nothing. 2 times 2 can't happen now. You can become aware of it now. The sun is shining. It isn't going to happen at any time, but you may become aware of it at a certain moment. Harmony is. It isn't going to happen. Harmony is a state of eternal being. You may become aware of harmony happening, but that doesn't mean that there was ever inharmony. There never was, and there never will be, except out judging by the world of appearances. And so, your work of now isn't to make something happen now. It is to become aware now. You'd be surprised how many wonderful healings take place with a simple treatment like 2 times 2 or 4. Because it's declaring is. It's declaring that perfection is, harmony is, completeness is, allness is. That's what you do when you say 2 times 2 or 4. You're just saying it always has been, is now, and always will be. There never was a time when 2 and 2 became 4. There never was a time when do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do began. They always have existed, and in their very present values. There is a time when we become aware of it. And so there is a time when we become aware of our spiritual harmony, but there is never a time when our spiritual harmony begins. Our spiritual harmony was with us before Abraham was. God was with us in the beginning, before the book of Genesis was written. But there is a time when we become aware of it, and we call that time our treatment, our prayer, our communion. Now that is the purpose of this meditation work. You see, talking about God will do as little for us as talking about an airplane. Nobody ever flew anywhere talking about an airplane. They had to actually produce one, get in it, and start out. And so it is with us. No one has ever accomplished spiritual harmony talking about God. Only the actual experience of God does it. If God hadn't been with Moses, there would have been no opening of the Red Sea no manna falling from the sky, no water coming from a rock. If God hadn't been with Elijah, there would have been no ravens bringing food, no widows sharing. No, if God had not been with Jesus, there would have been no multiplying of loaves and fishes. There would have been no resurrecting from the tomb. There would have been no ascension. If God had not been with Peter and John, the impotent or the crippled man at the temple gate, beautiful, would not have been raised. If there had been no God with Paul, there would have been no miracles of preaching and establishing the Word through all of his travels. There had to be, not talk about God, there had to be a presence of God consciously realized. And when you have the presence of God consciously realized, then you can say, the Father within me doeth the works, the presence goes before me to make the crooked places straight. He performeth that which is given me to do. He perfecteth that which concerneth me. Who are we talking about? The He that now we have realized, felt within us. Emmanuel, God with us, the very presence of God itself. So remember that unless your prayer, treatment, communion, unless they rise in you to a place where you actually feel that presence of God, you've been merely talking about God, not experiencing it, and it is the experience of it that performs the miracles in the world. You can't ever perform a miracle any more than I can, and I can assure you that I can't. But every time there is a realization of the presence of God in me, a miracle does take place out here in the form of healing, supplying one thing or another. Every time that the presence of God becomes tangibly present in me, felt in me, aware, something happens out here, either for me or our students or patients. But without it, nothing takes place. So do not leave yourself in the position of clouds without rain. Don't leave yourself in the position of saying truths about God, talking about God, affirming about God, and then stopping your prayer or treatment without that realization, because it's the realization that does the work. It's the realization that does the work. It's the experience of God that does the work. Now, we don't have to have a class. That's it. This question is, please define enemies. Well, we've been defining it all this time. The enemy is any appearance of a selfhood or activity apart from God. Any evidence that you have, an appearance, a suggestion, a claim of a presence apart from God is your enemy, and you have to pray for it. In other words, you have to know the truth about it and get this feeling of the presence of God, then your enemy is dispelled. And it makes no difference whether that enemy is a sin, a disease, a lack, ingratitude, whatever it may be. That enemy is dispelled the moment you have this realization of the presence of God. And so, thank you.